Hello again, YouTube. It's been a while since I've made a video of any substance or any length. I made a video about a month and a half ago in which I said that in the next couple of videos that I upload to YouTube, I'm going to talk some more about a UFO sighting that I had in 1994. The sighting in 94, and then many years later, my house was engulfed in a blue light in the middle of the night twice a week. I've been absent from YouTube because we had house guests for about 4 months, a lady and her son that were homeless, and great friends of ours, a gal that my wife and I went to high school with, but somebody was always in our den watching television, and this is the only place I've got to make videos on. But I want to talk, as I said, about a little more about this UFO thing, and specifically in this video I want to talk about the fact off the top of my head that in the intervening years since 1994, when I had this UFO sighting when there's a UFO next to a freeway, I've run into a couple of people who have seen the same object at the same place, which is just bizarre to me. Again, I've never seen anything in the newspaper or anything like that about this, and a couple of people that I've run into said they've seen it, which is bizarre. I want to talk about this blue light thing at greater length because, retrospectively, if anything, the blue light engulfing my house is even weirder than the UFO sighting, because anybody driving down the freeway could have seen this UFO. I think that's something I'm going to talk about too, because I've had some people suggest to me that maybe that's not the case. I know some people I worked with at the time saw it, but anyway, I'll get into that. And I also want to talk about something that happened to me when I was very young. I want to thank the YouTube community, the people that have commented. A couple of people have said to me on my videos, you should, think about your earlier life and see if you've had any other experiences that you couldn't explain. And I was like, no. Prior to 94, when I was 41, I'd never seen a UFO. And then I watched a video on YouTube which triggered a memory, which may or may not have had something to do with the UFO, and I'll talk about that. But those are the main things I'm going to talk about. I don't know what else. I think there was something else, but I can't recall. But anyway, with that, let's dive in, and glad you're here. And this is weird stuff, and if I was some guy sitting at the house listening, surfing YouTube and stumbled across this, I wouldn't believe a bit of it. It is true. As much as I've said so many times, it's what happened, and I'm going to share my thoughts on all of this a little bit. But anyway, onward and upward. Just real quickly, too, I would say that if you stumbled across this video for some reason, you might want to go to my channel and watch the two-part little mini-series thing I did about seeing a UFO and the other things I mentioned, because otherwise this is not going to be very interesting or make a lot of sense. So you might want to watch those first. Okay, as I mentioned in that little intro, this is something I find really bizarre, and that is this. I had this UFO sighting in 1994 where I drove right up to a massive UFO that's sitting 100 feet off the ground next to an interstate freeway. It was not in the newspaper. It wasn't on the local TV news. Anyway, in the intervening years since that happened, it happened in 1994, I've run into a couple of people who say they've seen the same thing at the same place. And I'm like, I don't go around talking about this all the time. I talk about it now and then, but it's not something I bring up. Usually I don't bring it up. I brought it up in one situation kind of bizarrely. I'll tell you about that. In the first case, I went to a reunion, a class reunion that a friend of ours used to hold. It was unofficial, kind of a summer blast that she held for years every summer at her farm in a town outside of Flint. And about 2010, I went out there and ran into an old friend of mine who I'd lost track of, absolutely one of my very best friends from literally from kindergarten through and beyond high school. And very private kind of guy. He doesn't do the internet. I'd actually searched for this guy on the internet, couldn't find him. And we'd been great friends. In high school, we had a little band. I played keyboards and he played drums. And after high school, we put together another band and got our first job in a bar. Just a wonderful guy. Very, like I said, private kind of guy. Very serious sort of fella for a musician. And he just did that part-time. And in fact, he owns a surveying business now out in Fenton, Michigan. But anyway, so I ran into this friend of mine, Jack. And we're standing out on the lawn, catching up. Very excited to see one another. Talking about, families, friends, marriages, divorces, just catching up on all the things that we we've not been able to talk about because we've not seen each other. And this UFO thing came to mind, and he knows me well. And I thought, oh man, I got to tell Jack this. He's not going to believe it. And I tell him about it, and he looks at me after I describe what happened, what it looked like, and he looks at me and says, I saw that. I saw that too. And I was like, what? Is that? You got to be kidding me. And I was dumbfounded. I was just shocked. And he said, yeah. He said, I saw it. And if you watched my first video, I mentioned that I was on this freeway, and about 700 yards beyond where I drove, pretty much right underneath this thing, there was an exit at a road called Thompson Road, and I just zipped past that. I was horrified. But Jack said to me that he drove same kind of thing, going south, sitting to the right of the freeway, and he had the guts to take the exit at Thompson Road, go up the ramp, and he turned left on the bridge, and there's no traffic out there. It's a very rural area. And I don't recall if he said what time. It was dark out. And he turned around, and he was going to examine this thing at greater length, because he was like me, shocked, but he had a lot bigger balls than I had. And he said when he made the turn to look at it, it had disappeared. And this thing was like what I described, like 150 to 200 foot on each side, this huge craft. He said it was just gone. And I was, like I said, totally shocked that I found somebody who'd seen this. And because I don't go around talking about this all the time. And once in a while I talk about it. But I talk about it on YouTube because, it is what it is. It's YouTube's, you can say this stuff and people listen to it or they don't. But so, like I've said, this just strikes me as unbelievable. I'm going to tell this old friend of mine about this crazy experience of seeing a UFO that I've had. And lo and behold, he's seen the same object at the same spot. And, when he said he'd seen it, and as I said, drove up a ramp and turned around to look at it, and it disappeared. When he said he'd seen it, I presumed that he'd seen it at the same time that I had, which was, in my case, it was the morning of March the 18th of 1994. And I mentioned that to him at some point, and he said, well, yeah, but I didn't see it in 1994. I'm almost sure. And then he sat there and kind of deduced and thought about, his work schedule and what. He's absolutely sure that he saw it in 1995. And the same object at the same spot next to the freeway? I mean, this is crazy. But he's could he be wrong? Of course. I mean, but he was held firm, and he firmly believes that he saw it in 1995 at the same spot, which raises the question in my mind. The big thing is, I'm like, well, my God, how often is this thing out there, and how many people have seen it? Again, and I've never seen it reported like in a newspaper. It's just kind of crazy, and I don't go around talking about this in daily life all that often, which is going to lead me into the next story that I've got, and this is almost embarrassing, and it's so silly how I happen to bring this up, but anyway, that's my story about my buddy who saw the same object. Okay, in this next case, similar kind of deal. It's a bit embarrassing because I kind of reveal myself to be somewhat of a neurotic, but I am. So anyway, back in 2009, I'm at my doctor's office getting a yearly physical, and he sends me down to the phlebotomy office to get blood drawn. And I used to be totally freaky about having blood drawn. It just really bothered me. I didn't faint or anything, but I would tap my foot. I would kind of babble incessantly. I had to do anything to get my mind off the fact that there's a needle in my arm that's sucking the blood out. It just freaked me out. A couple of years ago, I had a heart attack, and I was in the hospital. I had a bunch of IVs. I had blood drawn a lot. The last time I had blood drawn, I helped the lady find the vein and watched her do it. It didn't bother me. But back in the day, for years, it really created a lot of anxiety in me. I just hated having it done. So anyway, I got into this office in the same clinic to have my blood drawn. It's a little tiny room. There's this matronly gal that sits behind a desk with a computer. I've been there before. And you sit in a chair, and a nurse takes your blood. So I'm sitting there, they're about getting ready to take my blood, and I'm looking at this gal, and she's kind of quiet. Like I said, I've seen her before, and I've had blood drawn, and she's got a computer, and on her screen, she's got this kind of new age spacey wallpaper thing with like a rocket ship and stars, and I'd just written an article for a buddy's website. He had a website about UFOs, and he said, would you write an article about your UFO sighting for my website? And I said, yeah. So I just written that. And I'm sitting there, and they're starting to take my blood. And I said, hey, you should go to this website and read the article I wrote about seeing a UFO, this huge triangular UFO,
out on US 23 between Baldwin and Thompson Roads. You should read it. This is how nervous I was, right? Like she would care, right? It's crazy. But to my surprise, she looks at me and says, "Oh, my neighbors saw that too at the same place." She said they saw the same thing. My neighbor, he's an attorney, and his wife's a teacher. And I said, well, what'd they think about this? And she said, oh, they were horrified. She said they literally drove home at a breakneck pace, as fast as they could, and they thought it was the end of the world. That's what they kept thinking. This is the end of the world. They drove home as fast as they could in a complete terror. An attorney and his wife was a teacher. And now I'm getting this secondhand, but this lady runs this office. She's been there for years. She doesn't strike me as some kind of crank or nutcase. She's obviously a professional of some kind. And she's not going to make it up. And the fact that I'm getting it secondhand is kind of neither here nor there. She knew quite a bit they'd obviously confided in her to some extent about this whole thing. Same kind of deal. They're driving down US 23 between Baldwin and Thompson Road and drive up to this massive triangular craft. So I'm thinking, how often is this thing out there and how many people have seen it? And something else that occurred to me, and it has occurred to me many times, is real briefly, is that I was a musician for years, and I was self-employed. Then I was a salesman, and I tend to be a real honest guy anyway. But if a person is an attorney or a teacher or a high school coach or a plumber or whatever, I think a lot of people that have these experiences are not going to share them with hardly anybody. They're not going to talk about it like I do. I think a lot more people see these things than you would think. People think there's a lot of UFO reports, but there's actually a lot more people that see these things than will talk about it, as publicly as I do. Because, being self-employed, I didn't have a lot to lose. No one was going to fire me being a piano player because I saw a spaceship or a UFO or whatever it was, So but it was a crazy experience. How it came up was totally silly and a bit embarrassing, but and I certainly did not expect that to be the response from this woman, at a clinic where I see my doctor when I tell her this story. It's just, I'm like, again, how many people have seen this thing? It's nuts. And it's never been in the newspaper. Okay, something else I wanted to touch upon, and it's kind of a wild idea, but I think it's worth considering, as crazy as it is. And just to set it up kind of a little bit, after a few years ago I had a heart attack, and after I had the heart attack I was very depressed, and I started going to a therapist, which I'd never done in my life. And in fact, I still see this guy because I take a very light duty tranquilizer, Ativan. I don't think it does anything to me, but in order to get that I still have to see him, to see the nurse. Okay, so I still see him. He's a great guy. We've become actually great friends. And so I go to see this guy because I was depressed about the heart attack. First couple of sessions, we talked about my life and my displeasure with the medical community for having cut me off of one medication too fast, and I had a heart attack. And by about the third session, this UFO thing came up. I'd never really talked about it with anybody really, really openly, and it had been this burden for some reason that I'd carried around. And in fact, when I first talked about it, I got a little bit emotional, and it was surprising to me. It's been kind of a stressful thing. But anyway, I ended up talking to him about this at tremendous length. We still talk about it when we're not just surfing the net goofing off. He's a wonderful guy, like I said. I just think the world of him. And he believes me, and that's good for me. So anyway, one thing that he said to me early on is, I told him that, this was not in the newspaper, it wasn't on the TV news, and he said, well, maybe only some people can see him. He said, I really think that maybe just some people can see him based on what you've told me. And that struck me as really wild kind of daffy idea. And I said, I don't think that. I said, other people where I worked saw it, and I just don't think that could be the case. And it just sounds too out there, right? But anymore, I've done some research into it, and I mentioned in my video in which I talked about some coworkers who swear that they got abducted. They said they didn't see anything in the sky. I saw this thing for a couple of miles. I saw the lights and thought it was a plane. But maybe there's something to that. I mean, maybe it's like my dad could curl his tongue. It's something, you have a genetic chromosome or something. I can't do it. maybe only some people can see them. I don't know. Maybe that's why nobody else. I also mentioned in my first video that while this traffic was sparse, nobody pulled over. I was too scared to pull over. But this massive thing is 100 foot off the ground and sitting right to the right of the freeway. And nobody had pulled over. And so, as crazy as it sounds, maybe there's something to that. I've done, a little bit of research, very, not unscientific, watching YouTube videos. But, it's not such a bad resource. And in fact, I got a clip I might play right now of a gal that speaks to this. And again, as crazy as this sounds, maybe some people just have something in them that, they don't see them, and some people do. It sounds nuts. Here's a clip, something to think about. I don't know. I'd like to get your ideas on this.
I will be driving, and it will be broad daylight, and I'll look up, and something's hovering over my car, and I'll be looking around going, okay, I'm in traffic. There's a lane here. There's a lane here. We're all stopped at the light. Why am I the only one seeing this? There are flashing lights on this thing, very, very colorful. How am I the only one who is seeing this? And I remember calling my ex, who isn't into this at all, but I was so terrified. I just called him up. I'm like, have you heard anything about UFO things or whatever? And he had said at the time, actually, I heard something was happening in Montreal, and this was probably about 7 years ago.
I just want to add real quickly that it was not just the video I just played and or my therapist suggesting this idea that made me think, maybe there's something to this after all. I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, many of which feature, notable researchers. I watched one recently with Bud Hopkins, in which he talked about this idea at length. I cited numerous cases where one, for instance, where there were like 8 people on a beach and there was a craft hovering, out above the water, like 200 yards. And like 3 or 4 of the people are going, oh my God, what is this? And 3 or 4 of the people are going, what are you talking about? We don't see anything. So, and I've seen a bunch of videos like that. And Bud Hopkins had seen this repeatedly too. And I also talked to the state director of MUFON for Tennessee. I think they actually have 2 separate things for MUFON there. Anyway, long story how I talked to her. Very nice lady. And I was telling her about my UFO sighting. And I said it was odd that nobody had pulled over, and she said the same thing. She said that in her experience, some people can see them and some people can't. It sounds crazy. She described people who could see them as empaths or intuitives or something. I don't remember the word she used. I do know that the people that I worked with who swear that they were abducted by this thing remember going up into the air, their van spinning around, being examined. They said they never saw anything in the sky, which is, they didn't see this craft as they approached it. So maybe some people can see them and some can't. It's crazy. I don't know what you think. I don't even know what I think. All this stuff is crazy. But I'd like to hear what you think about this. Apparently, maybe there's something to it. All right, I should make an outtake video. We have 3 little dogs, and they keep going nuts and barking. I have to keep starting and stopping. But moving on here, I mentioned in my intro that among the comments that people made on my previous videos, a few people said, you should examine your earlier life prior to seeing this UFO in 94 when I was 41 and see if you can think of any, I guess they're thinking, missing time or UFO kind of related experiences. And my immediate reaction to that was I never had anything. And in fact, I'd seen a daylight meteor at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Texas, which was absolutely either a meteor or space junk. It was really awesome. It's just steaming across the sky and crap behind it burning. In fact, a buddy of mine, again a musician, we were playing down in Brownsville, said it's a UFO, and I'm like, well, if it is, they're all dead because it was a meteor or space junk burning up. And in '72 in Michigan, I saw a weather balloon that had escaped the lower atmosphere and got way up into the stratosphere near dusk, and there was like this metallic dot up in the sky. Our neighbors called us outside and said, you got to see this. But what it was a weather balloon, because that's what the report finally was, and I think it was because we all watched it finally kind of implode and crap fell out of it. It was a weather balloon. So I don't leap to thinking everything I see is a UFO. But as I said, when people asked me this or said this on these other videos, I was like, nope, never seen anything else. And then I watched a video on YouTube, or it might have been Gaia. I think I joined Gaia for like 2 months and then stopped that. I didn't find it all that interesting. And
But I may play that video. And what it was a lady talking. It triggered my memory. She was talking about I can't think of her name. She was talking about the fact that sometimes people mistake UFOs for meteors, okay? And all of a sudden I went, wow, that was this thing. And what the thing was when I was 14, I was playing in a band. Actually, yeah, I was 14, playing in a band, and always been playing in bands, right? And playing in a band with a guy named Jack, a different guy than this guy's a bass player, and he was 15. Lived out in Fenton, Michigan. Actually lived in a farmhouse about 7 miles out of Fenton. And I went out there one night, spent a couple nights with him, and we went into town. His mom took us into town so we could go to the Fenton Community Center where they would have bands, they would have concerts. In fact, we saw Bob Seger there for 25 cents one night, and a Question Mark and the Mysterians for 25 cents. I don't recall who we went to see, but we went to see a concert, and when it got done, the plan was we would call his mother. She was going to come pick us up and take us home because it was like 7 miles, and like 11:30 at night or whatever it was, and we were 14 and 15. So my mom was a helicopter kind of parent. I was an only child. She would have never done this. We call his mother, and she's got like 5 kids, and just kind of loosey-goosey. She's like, well, something came up, and I can't make it. You're going to have to walk home. And I was like, whoa, it's 7 miles. It's dark out. It was kind of creepy, and it's very, very rural. I mean, just nothing. Once you walk like a mile, man, you're out of town. You're in the boonies. And it was a long damn way. But we had no choice. So we're walking home, and as we're walking along, I tried to make a graphic to illustrate this, and I may post it right after this portion of video. But as best I could make a graphic to kind of show what it looked like. But we're walking along, and we're on this country road. It's dark. The stars are all out. And I look up in the sky, and I see this light going. It's just kind of zooming across the sky, like zzz. And I'm thinking it's a meteor, but it's not on a downward trajectory at all. It's just like and I recall it startled the hell out of me. And my buddy didn't see it. You know, he didn't. I don't think he was looking that direction. And I saw it and went, ooh, that's weird. Looked down, I looked back, and there was actually 2. They were kind of staggered. Like one was ahead of the other one. It was just like going across the sky like this. These 2, I mean, it was real odd looking. I go in the speed of maybe pretty much the speed of a shooting star or meteorite or whatever you want to call it. I mean, but the fact that there were 2 of them kind of, together, I was kind of a nerdy kid, and I tried to calm myself down because it startled me. It scared me, actually. And I tried to convince myself, I'm sure this is a meteor shower. I didn't say anything to my buddy. I didn't want him to think I was scared. Again, didn't want to be the wussy. And he didn't see it, so... But it did startle the hell out of me, and it stuck with me. And all I ever thought was, I'm pretty sure those are meteors or, falling stars or shooting stars, whatever they are. But I watched this video, which I think I'm going to play for you, and it made me think, I don't know. Maybe they were kind of weird looking for shooting stars, but that's all I got. I'm not saying, hey, it were UFOs, it spaceships, it was some alien encounter. I'm just saying this did come to mind. So what to make of it, I don't know. But I'd kind of forgotten it. And when I saw this video, I was like, damn, I remember that really scaring the hell out of me. I'm going to play a snippet of the video to which I referred. By the way, the lady's name is Kim Carlsberg, and I have seen her on, various like little UFO specials, National Geographic, whatever, Discovery Channel over the years. She claims that she is a lifelong abductee, /contactee, whatever you want to call it. That's, believe whatever you want to believe. But anyway, this is what she said that triggered this memory and made the little light bulb go on over my head and, did raise some questions.
And so it's still in that little no man's land, and I'm looking at it thinking, well, that's pretty bizarre. What was that? And I thought, well, it was definitely something not man-made. And so I thought, well, I really want my boyfriend to see this, but at the speed that thing moved, there was no way it was going to be there by the time I got back. So I sat there looking at it alone. And this is interesting because I now do night vision tours in Sedona. And one of the things that we have to identify is a shooting star. And if I hadn't known what I'm going to know in the next few minutes after that thing stopped, I could have assumed it was a meteorite, going horizontal across the sky. But and so I tell people now, you don't know if it's going to be, you don't know if that's a meteorite. There's no way to know because my first sighting could have been a meteorite. But at that moment, it turned around and shot diagonally across the bay, and it started hovering 20 feet in front of my window.
Obviously, something very bizarre happened to this woman, which did not happen to me at all. I just thought I saw 2 meteorites kind of flying across the sky, in tandem, which was kind of odd, and it did scare the hell out of me at the time, and I don't know why, but it did. And they may have just been meteorites. I've tried to illustrate what I saw using Photoshop and just creating a graphic, which I'll show you here. Okay, I think I've explained it pretty well, but I endeavored to make some crappy graphical representations. This is what I saw when I looked up the first time. Just glanced up and saw this light moving across the sky horizontally. It was a point of light, not a line. I used a line to show the trajectory, that it was straight. I looked down and almost immediately glanced back up. I was nervous. It kind of startled me, and there were 2 like this. Again, just points of light, and they did not have a trail of fire or something behind them or a line, but this shows the trajectory, and that's what I saw. So what was it? I don't know. I know at the time it scared the hell out of me, and I just looked down, didn't look back. So that's that. All right, I mentioned early on in this video that retrospectively, seeing this UFO was totally freaky in '94. And I'm kind of presuming you've seen my first 2-part video thing I did. Years later in 2012, twice in 1 week, my house in a city in the middle of the night, I happened to be up the first time. The second time my wife was up and I was asleep. My house was like engulfed in a blue beam of light, which was crazy. And, as time has passed, that second episode has kind of troubled me more and raised more profound kind of questions, because, seeing the UFO was crazy. And it was, at the time, as I've said, it was horrifying and it was as scary as it could get. But, other people have seen it. It was parked, whatever the hell it is, it was parked next to a freeway. Maybe some people couldn't see it, but other people did see it. And that's one thing. But then this thing in 2012 is kind of like specific to me. I mean, they're at my house in the middle of the city at 3 o'clock the first time, and at about 4 days later at about the same time. As I said, I was asleep the second time, and my wife tried to wake me up and couldn't. She wasn't home the first time. And, I was getting a cup of coffee the first time that this happened. I'm playing with the internet late at night because I couldn't sleep, and she was across the street. And I look out the windows, I'm pouring a cup of coffee, and there's a window right there above the coffee pot, and there's just this blue beam of light comes on. And I've mentioned, in my earlier videos that I said, "You jokers." I believed that to be a UFO because there were no shadows. It was this really odd color of blue. It went off, and then I thought, did I just see that? And it came back on, and then 4 days later, I'm asleep, and my wife wakes me up in the morning saying, that blue light, it came on, that you told me about, it was all around the house. And, the thing for me, I guess, is that, okay, so I saw this UFO in '94. I'm driving down a freeway. Other people saw it. Maybe some people couldn't. I don't know about that, but a lot of people did see it. I've talked to people who have seen it. So there it is. But then this thing's at my house, and I'm like, what is what have I got to do with any of this? I've never been abducted. There's checklists you can read. I have no missing time. I've never really had any dreams about aliens. I've had some dreams about seeing that UFO, which scared the hell out of me. I don't have any marks on my body. I don't see a picture of an alien and go, oh my God, I'm having a flashback. Nothing. I don't think I've been abducted. So my question is, what is this? And by the way, this is important too. After I saw the UFO in '94, I was just obsessed with this stuff. I on VHS tapes, I recorded every UFO special. I started listening. I found Coast to Coast AM on the radio with Art Bell. I would record that stuff. And I never heard anybody say anything about blue lights being associated with UFOs. And as it turns out, they are associated particularly, and I'm going to talk about where I've learned this, they're particularly associated with abductions. And I'd never heard that, I promise you. I promise you. I never recall having heard anything about this blue light thing. And when it came on,
I immediately thought it was, one of these things. And you've heard my account of it. It came on, it went out, it came on, ran out the door, it was out. But in the last 3 or 4 years, I've done a lot of research on the internet. Like I joked earlier, YouTube it's actually a pretty good resource. And to my amazement, I just started doing this like about 3-4 years ago, and I found all of this stuff about these blue lights. It's pretty common, and in fact, it's associated particularly with abductions. I was told the same thing by 3 or 4 people who I've been in contact with, because this has troubled me. I mean, this has just raised so many questions in my life that I've been trying to sort this out forever. And I've talked to some people. I talked to a lady at MUFON who was just attending a meeting there. I've been to a couple of MUFON meetings. I'm going to talk about that maybe in a different video. And I walked in one day, and I'd been to a meeting I didn't like. I've only been to 3. The second one I went to I didn't like, and I didn't go for a long time. Then I went in one day to go to a MUFON meeting, and I was cranky. I was in a crappy mood. I was like, why am I here? I don't belong here. These people are crazy. And threw my coat down on a chair, and there's a lady sitting at this big table. There's these round tables. You sit down, you have dinner. And I said, I don't know why I'm here, but this stuff, this blue light thing is driving me nuts. I got to figure out what this is, and I know it's probably nothing, or it is something, or whatever. Anyway, I was kind of babbling, and I was stressed out. And there was a very nice lady sitting there, about my age, late 50s, early 60s, and very normal appearing woman. And she said to me, and it was very sweet, she said something like, honey, it's all right. She said, I know what you're talking about. You're not crazy. I've seen the blue light too. And I said to her, I said, well, what is that? And she said, that's when they take you. And I said, well, nobody's ever taken me. And she said, well, this is what she said to me. I'll never forget it. She said, I said something like, they've never taken me. I would remember, or I'd have some indication. And she said, well, if they do it properly, you won't. And I was like, well, okay, maybe so. So anyway, there was that. I've talked to numerous people, that some very well-known people that have said that this is pretty typical of an abduction. So I've assembled a little video that I'm going to play. I'm going to share it with you. I'm not going to share you the whole thing because I found too many videos, but I was shocked to find all these accounts online, especially this video starts with Dr. John Mack. If you don't know who he is, you should look him up. Nobody knows more about abductions than John Mack. And I've just assembled this string of short pieces of video that I'd like to share with you that shocked the hell out of me. And because I'd never heard anything about this blue light this beam of blue light engulfed my house. With that, I'm just going to play you some of this, and then we'll talk briefly about it, and then we'll wrap this up. First, this is a picture of my little house in the ghetto, a rental house that I owned that I had to move back into because my wife drove us to bankruptcy. And this is what happened twice in a week at night at like 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a beam of blue light around the house.
What is a typical alien abduction like, if there is a typical one?
Well, there is a pattern. What happens is the person is in their bedroom or a car, or in one case a woman on a snowmobile, or a child in a schoolyard, and a powerful blue light or an energy comes along. Other people in the environment may be switched off, so they may witness, they may not witness what happens. The person is taken up on this blue light by some energy. The little beings are around with the big black eyes, and they're kind of small and thin, and they emanate a certain energy. They're taken up.
I think the most characteristic element is the perception of light. And the light seems to have a certain power in it.
And as I was going down to sleep, I thought, there's a blue light coming through.
I woke up, the light.
I wonder what that is. And I just went to sleep.
The light was very bright, very blue, very, very blue.
Seen this face? When was it?
The first abduction Sue remembers clearly occurred when she was 19. A pulsating blue light woke her as it made its way across the bedroom. Sue was in bed, terrified and unable to look at it. In 1990, Sue experienced an abduction in which her 2 children were also involved. Danny was 13 and Jake 11. Night had fallen. Sue and David were woken up by a blue light and their dog Molly whining.
I'm imagining all of this.
These experiences sometimes happen to a number of people together. I have one case that involves 6 people. In Ohio, they were coming back on a little hike, young people with an adult, and one of their little group ran ahead to the house to make some cocoa or whatever, and as they walked through the trees, suddenly there was this enormous bluish light shining on all of them. They felt they couldn't move. The next thing they knew, the light was gone. They described it as big as a baseball diamond in size. When it had gone, they felt very peculiar, and they were not lined up in the same way they had remembered being when the light first shone on them. They came into the house, and there was something like an hour to an hour and a half missing time.
So it's my understanding you went through an abduction by aliens.
Right.
What happened to you?
Well, I was lying on my bed around 9 or 9:30. I had a headache, and it seemed to move into my eye. After a while, I became aware of this blue beam coming down from the sky. It was about 25 feet from my home. I got so scared. I was so scared. I ran downstairs and ran out the front door, and I looked around the street, and I wanted to find help. It was surreal. There were no birds, no toads, I mean, it was springtime. Usually there's a lot of noise at night. I was the only thing that moved.
You also underwent hypnosis.
Right.
And found out subsequently that you too, in fact, had come in contact with beings, creatures, aliens.
Right.
What happened to you?
Well, on this particular incident after the blue beam, I woke the next morning with a eye injury. There was a red line going from corner to corner and blood pooling up in the bottom.
I took a couple of years.
When I woke up as an adult in the room filled with the blue light, for a moment I thought to myself, is this a gas leak? Is this a gas explosion? Is there a fire? Followed immediately by the fear of they're coming. And I tried to shove myself underneath the bed, tried to hide, tried to squirrel myself away because there was nowhere in this small room to hide. And then sure enough, door opens up and these two beings scurry in, and one touches my leg, very physical, touches my leg, and I knew that that light meant that those things were about to show up.
Something of a much greater power than we can even envision.
You just know when they're there. There's a blue light that comes in. There's no way that you can deal with that kind of fear.
And most abductees think the aliens have...
A lot of them, their experiences happen being engulfed in a blue light. A lot of them had, well, all of them had the same experience of these entities coming through walls or coming through...
So it's a week or so later. I'm going to put this little outro on here. I've been kind of tired. I got diagnosed with COPD, which is a lung problem, and after some tests, my doctor said that my lung function was my lung age, they call it, was 94 years old, and I'm 67 in about 4 days. So I've been kind of tired, but as far as this blue light thing goes, I didn't play all that or talk about it at this greater length to suggest to anybody that I've been abducted, because I absolutely believe I've not been abducted. People, when abductions take place, if you're in the vicinity, people sometimes see the blue light. So Peter Robbins, who's a UFO writer and researcher when he was a kid, he and his sister had an encounter with a UFO, and he fell to the ground and watched her go up in a beam of blue light. So he was not taken. So I do find it odd that I've had a very, very close-up encounter with a parked UFO. Then this blue light episode. I think for me, I've wondered if they're just trying to get my attention or convince me that they're there or whatever. As simple and stupid as that sounds. I mentioned I've only had a couple of dreams about this stuff. In 2 dreams, I was reliving the encounter where I was driving down the freeway and, coming upon this UFO. I woke up in both cases and did not go back to bed, and I was really distressed. I had another dream where these aliens, or whatever you want to call them, had landed. I was out on a sidewalk, and these people were all freaking out. They were looking up and going crazy, and I was just trying to calm them down and tell them this was going to be all right, that it was nuts to react like this, and they need to just walk calmly. And I was trying to get people to just,
trying to usher them along and get them to calm down. So I've wondered, when these things could they impart some kind of knowledge to people, like, hey, go tell people this? Because I feel compelled to investigate it myself and also tell people about it, because I have grave concerns for humanity that these things will one day arrive and say, hi, how you doing? We're here. And a lot of people are just going to go totally apeshit. They're going to go crazy. And that's totally uncalled for. There's no reason to do that. I think some of these beings, I think there's different kinds of them. I may talk about that what I think these are in another video and how this has affected me. But I think some of these beings we may share DNA with. I mean, my point being, how alien are they? They're just like, some of them may be just like our much smarter relatives, But, panic is uncalled for, and so is aggression or hostility. And I think it's why I share my experience, and also, as I said, to investigate it further. And love to hear any of you have had similar experiences. I'd love to hear your opinions on what I've said and what I've shown you. And I like the interaction. I've just felt the need to do this. I wanted to leave this as a little living record of what happened to me. It's the truth. My phone's about to ring, I think. But anyway, thank you for hanging with me. God bless you, and I'm out of here. I do plan on making a couple of more much, much, much shorter videos. This was long. It was kind of the last things I wanted to talk about with regards to the sighting and the blue light thing, and, well, the things I've mentioned. But I may explore some other things like I've explained in future videos. I don't know. Hopefully I don't croak. My lungs are not good, they say. So thanks for being here. I hope you have a good day, and keep your eyes on the skies and keep an open mind, because these guys, whatever they are here. They're not visiting. I think they may have always been here. So with that, I'm out. Have a good one.